Bonjour French 1, this is your section 1.2 video all about our very first verb of the year, the verb avoir, and negation, which basically means making a sentence negative. Before we get into our first verb though, we actually have to know what a verb is. A verb is of course an action, word, or phrase, just like it is in English. The thing that you may not realize that you do in English that you will definitely have to learn how to do in French is verb conjugation. Conjugating a verb means changing a verb. In French, that means changing the ending of it, and sometimes it does in English as well. I'll give you an example here in just a moment. But you change that verb to make it match the subject of your sentence, whatever that subject must be. And if you change the subject of your sentence, that means your verb has to change to match it as well. So, for example, in the English language, you have potentially the sentence, I have a book. If you change the subject from I to he, you can't say he have a book and leave the verb the same. You conjugate the verb for to have, meaning you change it to make it match the new subject. So you change it from I have a book to he has a book. Now right now I know you're thinking, well that's easy, because in the English language, if you don't do things correctly, it sounds weird. The problem is everything in French sounds weird to you at this point, so you just have to get better about memorizing verb forms. Because if you don't use the right form of the verb, you end up saying silly things like I has a book or he have a book, and it sounds a little strange to a French person. So if you want to make sure that you're learning how to do that, you have to learn how to memorize verb forms. The way we typically memorize verb forms in French class is we use a chart, and this is the same chart you guys saw with your subject pronouns, as far as these are all your singular forms, these are all your plural forms, and we'll talk more about exactly what they mean in just a second. But first I want to remind you, you are required to write down everything that has a yellow background that's on the lines. Anything that is in parentheses with the green background is optional for you. Basically, if you want to write it down to help yourself remember the pronunciation, you can. So having said that, our very first verb of the year is actually an irregular verb. Eventually you'll learn that some verbs follow patterns and there's a predictability to them, but this one does not. It has its own pattern all in of itself, and it's the verb avoir, and it means to have. So these are all the ways that you say I have, you have, he has, she has, we have, y'all have, they have, all the different forms of it. Now you'll notice in the English language, pretty much the forms of to have are either the word have or has. But in the French language, there's 6 different versions to match basically all of the different kinds of subject pronouns. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through them. If I pause, I'm giving you time to repeat after me, so you're getting some work with the pronunciation. So for the I form of to have, if you're writing a sentence about how I have something, the way you change avoir so that you're not saying something silly like I too have a book, is you change the form of avoir to make it match the subject of je, your subject pronoun I, and that form of avoir is right here on the line. It's ai and it's pronounced j'ai. So all together, the J apostrophe before the ai means I have. If you want to use that same word have though with the word you, and you want to change your subject from I to you, and you want to say something like you have a book, when you change the je, the I, to the you also have to change that ai form. It has to match the new subject. And the new subject for to, or the new form of avoir, is pronounced a. So if you want to say in French you have to make sure that you use the to, or the you form of have, and say tu as. If, however, you want to write a sentence about he or she having a book, or even it, because remember, it's our masculine or feminine as well. If you want to say something along those lines, you need to use the il, el, en form of avoir, or the il, el, en form of have, which is a. And if you want to say it in a sentence such as he has, you would say il a. And she has would be elle a. The word for have, if you're using it in a sentence with we, which remember in French is the word nous, is avons. So the way you say we have is nous avons. If you want to write a sentence about what y'all have, you're going to use the y'all or the vous form of avoir, which is vous avez. And if you want to say they have, you have to use the they or the ils and elles form of avoir, which is ont, and it's pronounced il or elles ont. So again, the big thing you need to memorize on this page are these tiny A words here, or the A's and the O words here, because those are the ways that you change the word to have to make them match the subject. It's basically the words have and has in the French language. Now the only way to work with these is to basically memorize them, so that whenever you go to use them in a sentence and you think to yourself, I want to say something like he has my pencil, I have to think about how he is il, have is avoir, but I have to make it match he, so the il form of avoir is a, and you just have to work on memorizing it. One of the best ways to memorize it for my students in the past has been to use a particular song. If you want to go ahead and type in the YouTube video link in your browser and you want to take a look at it, you can, but we will be watching it in class a lot because it's a really easy way to brainwash these forms into your head. In the meantime, just make sure that you're referencing your notes every time you're using a form of the word have or a form of the word avoir, so that you make sure that you're using the right form until you have it memorized. So going ahead and giving you a couple of sample sentences here. If you wanted to say, I have a book, you have to actually think through every step of the sentence, which is really hard at first in French 1. You have to know that I is je. You have to know that the verb for to have is avoir, but you have to use the je form of avoir, which if you check your chart is that AI word. So j'ai, and then a book is un livre. So altogether, your phrase for I have a book is j'ai un livre. If instead you wanted to say y'all have some books, you would need to use that y'all subject pronoun, which is vous. You'd have to use the vous form of avoir for y'all have, which is vous avez, and then some books, remember, is des livres. So altogether you have vous avez des livres. And then I have two other samples here for you that you can go ahead and jot down. I'm not going to walk you through them in the interest of saving time, but there are two more examples for he has a book, il a un livre, and the classroom has a door. La salle de classe a une porte. Now the other major thing that comes up in this section is then the idea of negation, because what if instead of saying that you have something, you want to say that you do not have something? Basically, negation in the English language usually ends up by adding in the word not. Now in French, it means adding in two words to your sentence. And these are the magical words that make everything negative, and they are the words ne and pas. And they always go around the verb. And if you're still confused on what the verb is in a sentence, think about what matches the subject, what you just changed. Basically, it's the form of avoir for right now because it's pretty much the only verb you guys know. So it's a matter of taking the sentence, and instead of having something like j'ai un livre, I have a book, if you insert those two magical words ne and pas specifically around the verb, so there's that form of avoir and we put it in around the verb, you end up with the sentence je n'ai pas de livre, which means I don't have a book. Couple things to notice. Notice that ne becomes an apostrophe before a word that starts with a vowel, and all of your forms of avoir start with a vowel, so you're going to use an apostrophe a lot in this section. The other thing I want you to realize or recognize is from those indefinite article notes. Remember, you are not allowed to use the word pas followed by the word un, une, or des. So even though it was un livre before, if I were to write je n'ai pas un livre, it doesn't make sense to a French person. They always change pas un, pas une, or pas des to pas deux. Now I realize this is a lot of little details and it's a lot to remember, but I'm giving you everything you need to know about this up front. And at first you're going to make a lot of little mistakes, whether it's using the wrong form of the verb, putting the ne pas in the wrong spot, forgetting to do an apostrophe instead of ne, or forgetting to do the de. But eventually you'll get so used to the itty-bitty details that it'll become much easier for you. So just stick with it for now and work on getting it as correct as possible. And know that even if it's not perfect, you can still communicate with the French person and they'll understand what you're saying, but it will sound a little bit off, like if somebody were to say, I not have a book, instead of I do not have a book in the English language. So here's a couple of examples for you, and I'm kind of showing my work over here on these, and that's why there's so many lines here. First one, if you wanted to take the phrase je danse bien, I'm giving you a different verb here, which means I dance well, and you wanted to change it to something negative and say I don't dance well. Remember, the way you make something negative is you insert those two magical words ne and pas, and you make sure you put them around the action word or the verb of your sentence. So the way you would say I don't dance well, the opposite of this sentence, or the negation of that sentence, is je ne danse pas bien. If, for example, you wanted to change this sentence, nous avons des posters, we have some posters, and make it we do not have any posters, you have to put in those words for not in French, which is ne and pas. You have to put them around your action word of having, which is your verb there. So this first sentence is showing you what it looks like originally when you just put in the ne pas. And again, a French person would understand you if you were to say nous ne avons pas de posters, but to them it's going to sound something like we not have posters. It's close, but it's not exactly right. In order to get it perfect, you have to remember that if a ne is in front of a word that starts with a vowel, that it becomes an apostrophe. And you have to remember that pas can never be followed by the words un, une, or des. It always becomes de. The actual correct way to say we don't have any posters is nous n'avons pas de poster. Finally, if you wanted to say the sentence instead of they have a computer, say they don't have a computer. Here's your phrase for they have a computer. This is showing you what it looks like when you just put in the ne pas. Again, if you just remember to do that and you say ils ne ont pas un ordinateur, it's kind of like saying they not have computer. But either way, if you want to do it perfect, there's several steps you have to take. Right here in the second line, I'm showing you how, because the ne comes before a word that starts with a vowel, we've made it an apostrophe. Remember, pas un can never happen, so I changed it to pas de. But if you want to go that extra mile, and you're going to say it's extra, and you're going to say it's petty, but if you want to go that extra mile, you actually need to realize that de cannot come before a word that starts with a vowel, otherwise it becomes d apostrophe. So your actual perfectly grammatically correct sentence in French for they don't have a computer is ils n'ont pas d'ordinateur. Please do not get discouraged at how very detail-oriented this is. We will work with it a lot, and you can communicate even if you don't have perfect sentences.